It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogside Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports, media, business, industrial complex, and all its balls and strikes. How you doing today, Steve?
Balls and strikes. See, it's a harbinger of things to come. I'm doing all right, man. How about you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Did you enjoy Netflix opening day?
I did not. I'm sorry to say. I do have Netflix. And as weirdly enough, I'm Mr. As you know, Mr. Anti-subscription thing, Now Netflix comes free or buried at least in my Xfinity subscription. But my son pointed out years ago that we couldn't get it to run separately on his device because it was buried within Netflix, right? And so I actually end up now have two separate Netflix subscriptions, one that we can get separately on a device and one that we watch on TV through the Xfinity. So I'm paying Netflix twice through all this. And I don't watch it very much, but hopefully he does.
I apparently you did not miss much of a baseball game. I did not watch it either.
No, yeah, I don't know.
There is something weird about it being on Netflix, and I'm not even the most old fuddy-duddy type amongst the two of us, but opening
what? Are
day.
you accusing me of being a
Yeah,
fuddy-duddy?
yeah. I'm supporting your own self-classification. But I don't know. Opening day baseball on Netflix is
Shouldn't
just
it be on
not
NBC?
ring. Yeah, or just something, right? It should be on the biggest broadcast channel available, but that's the world we live in.
I don't blame him. I mean, look, Netflix. I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, Netflix went from basically the video version of that mail order music thing they used to do. Remember those?
Yeah, of course.
And that's what Netflix was for video, and it's come a long, long, long way. I mean, they were really market leaders. They were ahead of everybody for video, for DVDs, for streaming. But it's caught up to them in that now they can't get the rights to anything everything like they used to. So now they got to come with a bunch of programming and hence sports.
Oh yeah, of course. I understand all that. It just sort of makes me a little bit sad. Did you actually? I didn't share this with you, but I did know. Interesting note was that in that baseball broadcast on Netflix, I think it was Yankees Giants, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It was 7-0 Yankees, I believe. There was some givebacks in the not meeting performance from their NFL games.
Oh, I know. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they did have some givebacks, which was basically when, your numbers didn't match and you actually owe a couple free spots back.
That's a fairly standard.
Yeah, that's just how the advertising on TV works.
Yeah.
But they did have some givebacks from their NFL Christmas Day games, which I found a little interesting.
Yeah, well, I remember they're the ones that totally dorked up that fight. What fight was it that didn't get streamed right? It was it the Jake Paul and
no, that one was okay, I think, or at least
it
was
the
okay
one
for
before.
me.
There was one of them. The first one they did was a real train wreck. I remember.
Yeah, although I think I would have thought they would have had a few more train wrecks by now, but that seems to they seem to have it figured out in terms of pretty good signal.
Well, yeah, whatever tech nerd stuff they had to do, I think they did.
Yeah,
higher,
better elves, I guess.
Okay, so of your I'm going to call it television watching, whether you do it on a tablet or on TV.
Right. On a rectangle electronic box.
Yes. What percentage do you think of your viewing is old school network programming versus other streaming things? Because I have roughly my number in my head. I think for me, what do you think about? For me, I'd say 75 to 80% is traditional network. Or like off, like what I would think of as traditional cable TV.
Okay, yeah. So you're not when you say traditional network, you're not just talking about CBS, NBC, ABC.
I originally did mean that actually, but I changed it mid sentence.
So you would include
FX and
right.
Yes,
which you can't. Well, it all what's interesting is all sort of does depend on your cable package, right? Because and it sounds like you've got a cable package that actually bundles and
Yes.
repackages some streamers. So that gets a little because I don't know if
Well,
you
well,
can
no.
watch
See,
FX. How
it
do you
does.
watch FX?
It's because I have Xfinity and I've got like five out of 600 channels, and it's FX is one of them.
That's
Off
not
the top of my
typical, is what I'm saying. I think many even like kind of your traditional cable packages don't run FX anymore.
Well, I just made that up off the top of my head. I mean, think about what
But it's actually an
ESPN.
interesting one
You know,
because it's
yeah,
actually a great network. They have, so if you're
yeah.
talking about quality of shows, it's one of
Oh,
the
and they have
top
another one.
ones.
They've got like FXN or something too. There's a couple different FXs, but like CBS, NBC, ABC, and Fox. I do watch several programs regularly on that, and so I would say that's maybe I don't know 40 to 50% between that and sports and stuff. Like 40 to 50% of my viewing, at least.
I mean, if you take sports into account, I'd say mine's maybe more like 20, somewhere in 25 to 40. If you took sports out, it would drop considerably. Like, I can only name two network shows that I watch regularly, and that is Survivor and Abbott Elementary. I think those are and probably Saturday Night Live. So maybe there's three. And typically I watch Abbott Elementary on Hulu. Um, starting the day after or whatever. But the other two I actually watch either on my cable DVR or live
Okay,
on the networks. So not
I
much, not much other than sports. It's pretty limited.
I have not watched Saturday Night Live for years and years and years. I think it's gone way downhill, so I don't do that anymore. But let's see. So I could name 5 or 6 network shows that I watch on a regular basis. All of them are DVR'd. I don't watch any of
Yeah,
them.
yeah, that's a given. I agree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so I probably mean more than you, but I don't know if you even have a traditional
No,
cable
I do.
system.
I do. That's why
Do you?
it's a good one-to-one comparison.
And again, what Xfinity, and I think there's pretty much 2 major cable providers in the United States now, which is Time Warner and Xfinity. I'm not aware of too many
Well,
others.
for
I
Verizon
guess
with FiOS is
okay,
pretty large.
3. Yeah, I mean, but for what they've done for me for Xfinity at least is they've bundled Peacock, Netflix, and all of the streaming like HBO or whatever it's called now, HBO, whatever HBO is calling itself now. And so you
Well, the
can
problem is
log.
HBO is never calling itself anything. Other people are telling it what to be called.
Oh, yeah, true. But like any network that I get through Xfinity, I can log in separately through that Netflix through that provider's streaming service if I wanted to.
Yeah, I can do that too with
Yeah,
my cable
I mean
login.
I don't, but I mean there's no point
I do sometimes. It's a pain, but it's actually one of the ones that's
because you got to verify
yeah,
yourself
yeah.
through
It's one
the
of the more
service.
annoying ones for sure,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. All right. Well, there's our watching habits. Um, let's go into our first story here, Steve. You the refs, the NFL refs and the NFL Shield are not seeing eye to eye. In fact, they're not seeing mouth to mouth right now because they're actually not talking.
Yeah, no, and yeah, they're not making out in loving fashion, in business sense either.
They're not even yelling at each other from across the room.
No, this is very interesting actually, from just a business negotiation standpoint. So first, this has been in a couple different places, but first of all, ESPN had the story that we cite here is called "Sources: NFL Referees Break Off Labor Talks Amid Impasse" by Kevin Seifert, who I think we've done before, March 25th, 2026. And so they're both the NFL and the NFL Referees Association, which is the NFL Referees Union, are pointing fingers at each other, basically saying neither one is negotiating good faith. The NFL is saying the referees or union is being completely and totally unreasonable. The referees union is saying the NFL isn't even negotiating here. First of all, I just wanted to say if all of you wanted to, just so I can depress everybody in here, all the listeners, quote, according to sources, The average NFL official last season earned about $350,000 annually as a part of a multi-pronged compensation structure that includes game fees, bonuses, meeting fees, preparation fees, and other benefits. And we said on the show before that they're not even full-time employees. Some of these guys have full-time other jobs. Some of them are like attorneys who do this on the side.
They all have something else.
Yeah, they are making an enormous amount of money for essentially one afternoon of work for 17 weeks a year, which is gross. But so here's the thing. I've done a lot of business negotiations. You have too, Chris, in a different context than I have, but I'm constantly looking for leverage. I'm always talking to the clients and say, okay, well, what do we have leverage here? How can we use this point to advocate for our side? Well, it's one thing when the NFL Players Association makes huge demands because the NFL cannot operate without players, as they proved in 1983. When was the last replacement players? That was
87.
87. Okay. I was trying to get my Super Bowls right. It's a whole nother thing when it's referees. Now, the NFL had this happen several years ago. The story
2012.
Yeah. And they went with some replacement refs. They had some controversy, including a pretty well-known controversy about what was a touchdown or not. But the bottom line is the NFL referees union does not have nearly the leverage that the players have on this thing. And the NFL knows that, and the refs don't seem to know that. So I don't know if this is going to get done. The story says the NFL offered a 10% increase in game fees and then up to 30% for those who worked the Super Bowl. The NFL union just has said basically it's not just a labor issue between the league and officials. This directly impacts working conditions. We're closely monitoring the situation. They're basically saying the NFL isn't doing anything. So I just think it's an interesting snapshot of leverage in a negotiation that we don't normally see.
Yeah, I mean, if you do remember, those of you old enough to remember the 2012 season, I think the refs came back somewhere halfway through, 2/3 of the way through the season, and I think because the only thing that they actually did, do have for said leverage is what a train wreck that first half of the 2012 season was. It was the main narrative of that season until that got sorted out. And then I think it crescendoed either on a Sunday or a Monday night game. I think it was a Packers game and about what was a catch, not a catch, blew up. And I think so the last time the refs had to be willing to go, what do we call it? Post brinkmanship, right? Like they ran, they maxed out the only leverage play they did have, which was that the on the field product, and then you can blah 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 about player safety and other things began to really deteriorate, and that's where they had their leverage point. But that's 8-9 weeks into the season or whatever it was that year, and that's a gamble, right? Because each and every time is going to be different. You could roll that dice and suddenly those replacement refs don't become any more of a problem than normal refs and you look real dumb. But that's what it took last time in terms of leverage.
Yeah.
That's their only play.
Yeah. And the NFL is convinced, so it appears from the story, that they can just go get replacement refs. And frankly, I don't know why they're paying them an average of $350,000 a year for what they're doing. That seems like a dramatic overpay to me.
Or fully professionalize it, right?
But here, I've always said, though, I've heard many people have said that. People have put that on our website, and I've seen it on when I used to be on Twitter and everything. What are these people going to do for the other 6 days a week? There's going to be a day or two of preparation or training or something, but what is their job going to be?
I think you'd figure that out. That
really?
To me is details. Yeah.
Really? It's not a detail.
Well, first of all, I think the NFL refs do a horrible job.
I do. I agree with you completely.
There is probably performance improvement that can take up a good chunk of that time. You could make the same argument that if it is just a 1-2 day, 3 day with a generous definition of travel, then that's why they suck. That's why they make bad calls. So I think you could just, if this it was more professionalized and they were studying tape, right? Like just like everybody else involved with the production of the the biggest entertainment package on God's green earth is, then why can't the refs be studying tape all week? I mean, I think there is process improvement you could get by professionalizing it.
I have an answer. This just popped into my head.
Okay, go for it.
Let's assign a crew to every NFL team for their practice days.
Exactly. Right. That's exactly what I mean.
Yes. And then it doesn't have to be every day, but the teams really only practice Wednesdays and Thursdays in terms of like
for like
full
3
contact.
hours.
Right. And so send those. So what you have is Monday is a review the tape day. Tuesday is a training day. All day we're going to train and look at our mistakes. Wednesday and Thursday they go to their teams, and then Friday is either a training day or a travel day, depending on the circumstance. And then Saturday would be a travel day.
Yeah.
That would work, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Plus, yeah. So I think there is I think if you, but I mean, if I was the refs, to your kind of original point, be careful what you wish for.
They don't
right?
want that. They want to make the free extra cash.
Right. So, but that, I think that's how you'd have to do it. You'd have to professionalize and sort of standardize, and then thus give more control to the league ultimately in the process of refereeing their sport. So it's either it's either movement towards that way, or you're going to get this kind of brinkmanship and probably, dragging on into the season until the NFL has got just enough pressure to give them an extra 3% or whatever.
Because if you think about it, they're the only refs that aren't full time. In baseball's playing every day, basketball's playing every day. Even like a fake sport like soccer. I don't know how, soccer's not a real sport, but I mean, they do have refs and they play much more than I don't know how often soccer teams pretend to play their game, but it's more than just once a week, I think.
I don't think it's much more.
I don't know. I really don't.
I mean,
so we'll leave them out, but hockey, basketball, baseball all play multiple times a week. And so they're all full-time employees. I think I told you, like I think I've told you on this show before, but I went to the legal community is fond of throwing legal training conventions in various cities and whatnot. And I got dragged to one of these against my will in Las Vegas several years ago. And who's the referee? That's the dude who looks like he's on steroids. No,
Sterator.
No, it's the other one. Anyway, that guy,
the buff ref.
Yes, the buff ref was there and gave a training speech at this thing. And it was a ridiculous speech. All he did is talk about how he knew John Elway and all. It had nothing to do with the law at all. But the point is, he was an attorney full time. That's what he actually did. He practiced law theoretically. And what he was really doing is just selling his name and letting his associates do the work while he, dials around the country doing NFL stuff. It was gross, but point is that guy had a full-time career, and a lot of them do stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. No, they all have side careers, side hustles, whatever. Yeah,
but when you make $350,000 a year for working Sundays, it doesn't have to be much of a side career.
No, and quite frankly, I think you can make a real case that the on-the-field product demonstrates that.
Yes, I mean, how many times? I mean, granted, none of us are refs and all that, but we see. Sometimes any idiot can see that they missed a call, especially when the network broadcast slows it down and shows you. So I think it'd be, part of this story here in the ESPN column is talking about how the NFL is going to like increase and centralize the review of calls, which is
right. Yeah, they're losing. I mean, this is how much of the refs' jobs are going to be lost to AI.
Yeah, or somebody in a booth,
right?
But the problem is. Well, and baseball's already done this, by the way, if you've noticed.
Yes, I have.
See this? Did everybody else out there see this? They now have an automated strike call, like that's a backup call. So the ump calls, because I saw the first challenge, like Netflix blew it and didn't even mention that it happened because they were interviewing the manager at the time. Did you see this?
I know. I did hear that they wasted a lot of time talking to outside guests rather than paying attention to the
yes, because what happened, I forget who was on at bat, but the batter challenged the call and they did the automatic review, and it turns out the ump got it right. and Netflix completely missed it because they were talking to the manager the entire time. But point is, in the NFL, it's not really that. It's that they have somebody in a booth in New York, or multiple people in a booth in New York watching, and they're going to be the backup.
And I
Basically.
think the NFL also has already did that this past year with a couple of very specific use cases. I think with like
Yeah, yeah.
like the clock and things like that.
I don't know why they don't have it for everything.
I think they're already yeah. So anyway, the refs are in a bad position,
There's not a
and
lot of leverage. Remember that in business, they don't have a lot of leverage.
so they're just going to have to, if they don't show up for work and roll the dice to see what happens on the field.
Then the
Yeah,
NFL is going to get a bunch of college refs and throw them out there. Is what's going to happen.
yeah, no. Uh, I guess they get paid $350,000 a year for everyone to hate them. Uh,
Yeah.
um,
Here's a good. So we can move on, but here's a good snapshot from the story about how the NFL refs see themselves as the abused, mistreated, younger brother here. Okay, in an email sent later Wednesday to NFLRA membership from a source, the members were informed that the quote lack of respect and recognition of our value to the game was an insulting representation of the current league's position. I got news, unquote. I got news for you guys. You aren't the game. You have nothing to do with the game. I could do without you entirely if they came up with a referee robot. You add nothing to it's like the NFL. It's like they made the baseball umps. You aren't the game. I want to see Mike Judge, not Mike Judge,
Aaron Judge.
Aaron Judge. I don't want to see the umps. Same with the refs.
The baseball is even closer to being replaced by robots.
Yes.
In fact, they sort of
they have that's
already.
What we just talked about. Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of baseball, baseball season has officially begun. The great march to next fall. And this is an interesting season in many ways, but there's a real tension hanging over the season, and that is impending labor lockouts, disputes. Basically, they're on the last year of their contract, and no new contract is in sight. All this while baseball is actually enjoying a pretty good run in all of its other metrics.
It seems like baseball, but every 3 years has this like pending doom on the horizon, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They can never get it straight. CNBC has a good story on this. MLB faces a historic shift as potential lockout, media rights, and other changes loom by Alex Sherman, dated March 26th. And I would like to point out that it should be an historic shift, not a historic shift, CNBC. Okay. The collective bargaining agreement is what this is all about, basically. The collective bargaining agreement ends at the end of the season. Now, we've done this show long enough. We've been through this at least twice, 2 other times, I think, on this show. The people need to understand that the Baseball Players Association has probably the most clout and leverage and intelligent, smart bargaining bargainers leading the charge than any other union. According to the story here, the main point that the owners are trying to push is for a salary cap that comes with the salary floor. They've tried this before. It's never worked. The Players Association has drawn a bright line in the sand about a salary cap. But the truth is the league really needs it, I think. Dodger fan, lifelong Dodger fan here. That having been said, it's not exactly good for baseball when the Dodgers can literally buy everybody, because they have so much money. That's not good for the game generally, as much as I love my Dodgers. Okay, so the next part of this, the media rights part. Well, first of all, let's stop right there. Comments about the union part of this, because we're going into media next.
Yeah, so I think there's some. The article does a good job of pointing out that there's maybe some bigger existential questions at play here with this labor negotiation, obviously driven by the salary cap and baseball, the union's ability to stave off a salary cap until now, unlike all of the all of the other sports leagues. So, but then there's some. It goes even deeper. There's even calling into question whether the national American and National league structure remains.
Yes.
Um, there was some, what the salary cap would do in terms of probably spreading out the competitive balance. The media deals in terms of, I mean, I'll get a little bit more in depth in a second, but the sort of much more a la carte nature of how you would get your or other teams' feeds, so to speak. I mean, there was a lot of stuff here that challenged how baseball works. So, they've been the one, for good and ill, the most kicking and screaming into the modern era, so to speak, of all major sports, and I'm including college in that. So, does this really become a line in the sand? I mean, you don't even have to be a purist to see where something like breaking the American National League construct and all that it's meant, it's a 100-year tradition, by the way, would be, would be a bridge too far for a whole segment of fans, and would be a radically different baseball.
I can't tell you the depth of my loathing and hatred for the idea of breaking up the American and National League. I really, really hate it. Now, I'm old fashioned, I'm stubborn. The question isn't what I would like it. The question is, could you get 10-year-olds who are going to become adults who are going to be paying for baseball in 20 years? Would they be okay with it eventually? And can the league survive in the process? And furthermore, would there be of financial value for them to do so? That's the question. What the story says is, to your point, it says, quote, Manfred has even floated the idea of expanding to 32 teams. That's not too nuts. And realigning the league geographically, upending or even eliminating the American and National leagues that have existed for more than 100 years. First of all, the league already is aligned geographically, more or less. I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe more aligned, I guess, or maybe having the Eastern Division and the Western Division. I guess.
Yeah, more the NBA model.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know, but so again, point number one would be, does this ultimately benefit them financially? I don't know if it does. And number two, I mean, could they sell people on it? They couldn't sell the older crowd on it ever. It's the younger crowd that's going to be the paying customers in decades from now. That's the question. I don't know what the point is of that.
I don't. Yeah, I don't even think it's an old fat. I think that the league structure is ingrained in baseball way deeper than any of the other sports. I even think it really is a kind of core principle, let's call it in business talk, of the league. So I think you'd really have to be saying, okay, I think 10 might even be a little bit old, right? Like, because you're so ingrained with it. I think you'd almost have to say, we're going to sacrifice generations. The problem is that baseball is traditionally a generations passed down sport. So if you alienate 20, let's call it 25-year-olds and up, because I think the leagues matter even that young, then they walk away, who's the shepherding those younger generations in, which is different than the other sports, I think, which, you don't have those kind of traditions. So sometimes traditions are just dumb and they probably need to float away. And sometimes you do potentially harm the structures that even, kind of are your reason to exist. And I think that one would be super dangerous and definitely not worth the squeeze. And I don't think it would just be your purists being aghast. Now, you can make an argument with like the way the DH is gone and some other things that they've already kind of flattened most of those aspects already. And then you really are just talking about a name change or a conceptual shift. But I still think it would be a bridge too far for too big of my majority of baseball fans.
Well, I didn't like the DH shift either.
Well, I know, but no, I'm only saying that like you could make the argument that the big things have already been done.
I get your point. Yeah, I mean now, okay. So you're a Yankee fan, right? You're not a Mets fan.
No,
you're a Yankee fan. I'm a Dodger fan. I have always had a very much stronger connection to the National League than the American League. I mean, I'll watch an American League game, but I don't really care about it nearly as much as I would, Giants Padres or the Cardinals, Brewers or whatever. Now, I think it's just because I've grown up for many years watching the National League. Now, is that the case for you in the AL?
Oh yeah, I'm an American League guy. Like
See,
the
and we're
years that I
not.
watched baseball, I was following the American League East. Lived in proximity to the Orioles. Plus New York, Boston, that Eastern corridor is squashed up anyway. It was like all one region to some degree. So yeah, no, I grew up an American, and even more specifically, an American League East guy.
Yeah, see, I'm an NL West guy, and we're not in any way. I guess first of all, I guess the Mets are just a redheaded stepchild of the New York area. I
Yeah,
guess. um, but there's a lot of Chris and I are by no means unique in that we're not a couple old fuddy duddies in this. Most fans are like that in baseball, I would say. There's not a ton of them who just have no allegiance whatsoever. And so I don't know if I understand the point. Now, first of all, this might just be Manfred just babbling like Trump style about all kinds of, nonsense that is going through his head. Because I don't see what the point is. I could see expanding to 32 teams. That's reasonable. The league's doing well, but I don't understand.
if I were
Oh, by
to
the way, go ahead. I have a whole. There's
if I
another.
were to guess, it would be, hey, players, you're going to have to accept the floor cap construct, right? But we're going to be opening up these other veins of profit into the whole.
What is the other vein of
Well, I
profit?
mean, new teams, right?
New
So
that I get,
yeah,
but the
yeah. But I'm just saying.
realignment,
So
I
these
don't
are
get it.
they're putting the now. Do you have to scramble the leagues to do that?
No.
That's debatable. But I'm saying this is the package of things he's saying is we've got, okay, fine. You give us on this, and we'll work to increase the pot.
So I don't have her in front of me, but Clay Travis pointed out this week that in his view, and I know Clay Travis is controversial, but in his view was that Major League Baseball has overtaken the NBA as the number two sport in the country, and he was basing it on ratings. He was saying for example, the World Series last year was a huge ratings boost all over the world, and whereas like the NBA Finals and day to day game ratings are lower, but and that's factually correct. This article, the CNBC article here, and I just floated past it. It's got a really interesting section here talking about profitability. Okay, and so they say the in 2025 MLB's teams had an EBITDA margin of just under 2%. Now EBITDA is a standard business term that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and mortgage. So it's basically sort of gross profits, really sort of. Okay, now 2%. Team average revenue is 426 million with an EBITDA of 7 million, according to non-MLB ballpark events. In contrast, the comparable margin for the NFL was 20%, NBA 21%, and the NHL 22%. In other words, simple terms, while the ratings have gone dramatically up, their profit margin is not nearly as much as baseball or as basketball, football, and even hockey. Why that is, we'd have to dive into their numbers. Um,
Well,
but
the
profitability,
ownership is argument is that those three leagues have salary caps and can manage
yes,
their labor costs.
and that's in no small uh, part correct. The NFL has crammed down on salaries. Even the NLB NBA has a soft cap essentially, but they do have a cap. And baseball, it's just nuttiness when it comes to salaries. There's such a contrast. The Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox versus like the Rays, the Marlins, the Pirates is crazy. And that doesn't happen in any other sport. And so that's probably, yes, that's probably part of the EBITDA issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you grow your margins and thus your profit when you have as much control over what your fixed costs are, right? So Because if you know what you've got to spend to earn and that is predictable and manageable, then you can focus on your profit. What are you going to get above that, right? How are you above your margins? Those other leagues with the salary cap constructs know what that cost is going to be and have different revenue sharing models too that are linked into that. So those are all things in which they can plan growth in a much different way. Where baseball, is much more of a 30 individuals showing up at a meeting type of construct in terms of, or 30 really businesses, right? So, and they don't have these structures in place to have a better understanding of what they have to spend and then thus what they want to make. I think that's what that EBITDA discrepancy really determines. Also, there's also the secondary knock-on effect that comes from this, which is what Steve you're mentioning, which is the lack of parity, which means that you are sacrificing revenue down the second half of your chain, right? Because parity keeps more butts in the seats, more eyeballs on electronic rectangles, more merchandise, right? Like parity is good for these leagues because it keeps teams in it, even if they're not have any chance, right? But it keeps them in it and it keeps things competitive and it allows all to make more money. The other problem of, six teams, kind of like blasting through their labor costs is that means that the have-nots are just simply not competitive enough to be a viable product. And then this is kind of what we're seeing on some of these media rights deals, right? Where you see that last third of the league is unable to stay in these media deals that are bringing in profit. And so that's why you see the league stepping more and more in, because they want to bundle this as one product and less 30 products, because that long tail of failure is a real economic drag on the league. And so that's all. There's really two huge effects. It's the lack of being able to know and manage your labor costs to know where your growth potential is. And two, it's that they really are sacrificing competitiveness and really viability of a product on generously a third of the league.
Yeah. So the NFL has centralized rights and power, Karl Marx style, decades ago in a way that benefits the entire league financially. The NFL controls game day media rights. They control trademarks. They control merchandising. Even, ticket revenue is distributed amongst the teams. Baseball is not like that at all. So to your point, it's, NFL shows up sort of with one voice and one business model, whereas in stark contrast, baseball certainly, and to a lesser extent basketball, but certainly baseball have 30 different entities here. And we did a story several months ago about the Diamond Sports Group and the media rights for baseball. If you remember this, folks, I know Chris does. Yeah. Well, those 9 teams that were a part of that have now, according to this CNBC story, announced their brand new Major League Baseball operated team channels that will be carried by DirecTV. That's the Nationals, the Mariners, the Brewers, the Cardinals, Marlins, Rays, Reds, Kansas City Royals, Detroit Tigers. All of those, it says they were previously part of Main Street Sports, previously part of Diamond Sports Group. And so they are now under control of Major League Baseball. Now, what Major League Baseball wants is to have all 30 teams under that, because they can sell those all 30 streaming packages, all 30 local rights to somebody in a bundle. But you can't sell the Dodgers, because the Dodgers have their own huge. You can't sell the Yankees, because Yankees have what's the company called?
Yes Network.
Yes, thank you. Yes Network. It's owned by the owners of the Yankees. And so they can't do that in the same way that the NFL does. It says also, let's see, that the Atlanta Braves is launching a new network called Braves Vision. That's going to be on Spectrum. But they don't have half of the league involved in this that the baseball can just bundle, which is a major problem, in terms of media rights, which is the huge amount of money that the NFL is getting is from media rights. It's just not the same in baseball.
I'm trying to find the quote because I think it's
I was
hysterical.
debating whether I needed to keep talking because it looked like you were doing something up
Yeah,
there.
you kind of hit on it, but I just so maybe you have it in front of you quicker. I love that one section of the article where it's like uh Diamond Sports turned into FanDuel Sports that
Yeah.
turned into like it's like literally
Oh, I
seven
got it. Here,
brands.
here,
Yeah.
I got it. So it's Main Street Sports, which was previously Diamond Group, which operates FanDuel Sports, which was previously Bally Sports.
Yeah. I mean, if that doesn't sum up the problem in that
Tell
one
us your
sentence.
business model isn't working without telling us your business model isn't working.
So yeah, I mean, and the article says this plainly. I think we've talked about it before, and plus, I don't think this is any kind of state secret. I think Major League Baseball is telling you directly they can't wait to gobble up these central rights and
Oh
produce,
no, yeah.
and be the central command for
But
the
why would the
media.
Reds and the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Cubs want to agree to that?
Yeah, I think
Only
that's
if they were altruistic and for the better of the league, but most people aren't like that. It's all this is all about it's just business, people. It's all about money and greed.
I think what and so I think the let's get to this level of victory and call it a day where Major League Baseball is at is like, okay, fine. You've got those 6 or 7 teams that have very powerful regional sports networks that they own, right? So they're not negotiating rights with your Bally
Well, the
FanDuels.
Dodgers don't own their own network. They just have a massive deal with
Right.
local
But
tribes. Yeah.
they're the masters of that, where they own it or
Right.
they can control the deal.
Right.
And Major League Baseball just say, okay, you 6 or 7 or whatever, you do your thing, do you, and they'll just gobble up as many teams, and they'll be the rest at some point, right? They'll have the other 23. And I think baseball is like, let's just concentrate on that and then worry about consolidation when we can get to that line.
Yeah, well, and that's clearly their strategy,
Yeah.
right? That's is what they're doing. That's what the article here was pointing out was
And then
that
to your point of leverage, then who's got the leverage at that point to force them in or to come up with some, detente that lets them coexist?
yeah. Do you guys want to be the bad apples that go on your own, or do you want to join the rest of the group here and be a part of the league? And thus far, those 6 teams have said no. We want to be on our own. But fast forward several years in the future, maybe they can put enough pressure on them to concede. I don't know. But you're clearly the strategy you're pointing out is clearly what they're doing. Major League Baseball just gobble up as many of them as they can and do as well as they can, and the other teams, you know, but they
Like
would
going to estate
obviously,
sale auctions and buying up
yeah,
these TV deals. Yeah.
yeah, but obviously they'd rather have the top tier teams in this because that's what most people want to watch. More people want to watch.
Who will be the first to fall, right? Is it like is it like eventually the Cubs fall, because there isn't
Well,
as
it's
much
not.
of a
You want to predict it? So okay, so the Yankees have their own network that they own. The Dodgers don't have that, but they have a ridiculous, the best local media rights deal in sports. So I'm going to say it's not the Yankees or the Dodgers. I want to say the Red Sox have their own network too. Do they not?
I can't remember.
I can't remember. The Cubs just have a media deal. So I'm gonna probably say the Cubs would be the first to go.
That's my guess too.
Yeah.
As soon as the collective can offer you the same and revenue and a better projected growth
Right.
than that mega contract you've been existing on, then those will jump. The holdouts will be the ones that control their own airwaves.
Yes. Right. And like you said, I think baseball just eventually say, okay, all the rest of the other 27 teams, we're going to do our thing. You three just proceed on, and someday you're going to wish you joined us.
And look, if it's a Netflix or an Amazon or one of these kind of reconstituted network, media multinationals, will eventually maybe have the media rights money to bolster the league there and be a big enough of a club to beat some of those teams in. That's
Yeah,
where the race will be.
but we're talking. This is the distant future. Here, this is a long term play for this. Um. Okay, so let's do this. Let's do a guess. One, do we think there's going to be a strike? And what percentage, what are the odds are that there's going to be a strike or a lockout? I guess to be a lockout.
I think high, whatever. I think, like, I think there's no doubt all of the principles are saying that there are. Now that's also a technique, but I'm going to take them at their word.
Yeah, me too. I think it's very, as a matter of fact, the story quotes MLB Players Association interim executive director Bruce Meyer as saying a lockout is, quote, all but guaranteed. So
Yeah.
um, I don't think the salary cap issue. That was where I want to go with this. Um, what do we think the odds are that baseball will successfully put a salary cap and a salary floor in?
I think the odds are high. I'm not good enough for fast math to get you the numerical explanation of that. But I think the odds are high that at the other side of this contract negotiation, so contract signed, you get something that looks like the NBA's and probably looks like the NBA's previous contract because that's even walked closer and closer to a hard cap. So I think it is that kind of soft cap, your hometown exemptions or whatever, kind of like a whole bunch of riders and caveats. But I think you see something that looks like versions of NBA salary cap over the last 20 years.
I think the odds of a hard cap are zero.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bridge too far.
Yes. And that's what in the NFL has the hard cap. You cannot.
And hockey.
And hockey. The NBA soft cap is because there's, all kinds of there's a bird exemption. There's all kinds of exemptions and you can, but that
has tightened too.
Yes. Yes. I think the odds are against them getting a cap, but I think it's possible. So I'm going to say like maybe 40-60 against the cap. So it sounds like you're maybe more, and I think it'd be good for the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm pro cap, even though I'm a Dodger fan. It sounds like you're probably on the 60-40 side.
Yeah, I think so. I just think there's too many fiscal realities.
I just think the Players Association is too stubborn.
Now, I think
they're going to kick the can down the road is what I think is going to happen.
I mean, that's what they would like to do. I think what you might end up with is, though, the most solid floor, right? So they set the floor pretty high is maybe the best way to get the players.
So I actually think that's the biggest problem, though, is the floor. Because some of these owners do not want a floor.
Well, then it's an internal battle with the owners.
Yeah, it is what it is. Because there's a group of them. Again, it's the ones at the bottom. It's like, the left side of the Dodgers infield and the Yankees infield is more than the salary cap, the entire payroll of like the Pirates and the Rays and those teams at the very bottom. They don't want a floor. I think actually that's a huge part of the problem.
But I think if they can get that right, that's what would get the players signed on.
Well, and to get that right, part of their argument is we don't make enough money to have a floor, right? That's what they're saying. And so they'd have to, Major League Baseball owners amongst themselves would have to institute more of a revenue sharing model to bring those teams up. And guess who doesn't want to share more revenue would be the teams at the top. They have an internal problem with this. That's partly why I think it's not going to happen.
And that's partly why it's lockout now strike, right? Because they lock the players out because the owners can't agree, right? Like they'll unlock it when the owners are on the same page.
Well, that's not the only reason they could do it. I mean, the lockout could be a leverage play by the owners, even if they were united, No, that's not the case here. I agree with you, but
it's it is going to be fascinating. And actually, the other baseball related story that we also had is actually part of the story because what baseball needs find new revenue streams, right? Because maybe these new revenue streams can get negotiated into going into more of a collective pot, which would then able to backstop. See what I did there? Backstop the lower earning teams, maybe to be able to carry a floor labor market, and that's these they just got in bed with Polymarket. That's official right now. So that deal is signed. And that's an example to me of Major League Baseball knowing it needs to diversify its revenue streams and especially diversify revenue streams that come into the center, not the edges, even if it redistributes.
Way to smoothly transition.
There you go.
He's a pro, kids. CNBC had a story about Polymarket. Major League Baseball names Polymarket exclusive prediction market partner by Laura Neela Condon, I guess, dated March 19th. Says the NFL is partnering with Polymarket to offer exclusive rights and data, including a, quote, comprehensive integrity framework Uh, yeah, Chris laughs out loud. I'm literally laughing out loud with him. It's just ridiculous. Um, and so it says Major League Baseball announced on Thursday, meaning at this point 2 Thursdays ago, announced it was naming Polymarket as the exclusive prediction market partner. The association also signed a memorandum of understanding with Commodities Future Trading Commission Chairman Michael Seelig. That name is probably not an accident, Seelig. According to the announcement, Polymarket and its brokers will gain exclusive access to MLB logos and official data and receive, quote, brand exposure across league events. The MLB said the agreement will include a comprehensive integrity framework. And this is now a quote from Polymarket CEO Shane Copeland. Polymarket is bringing fans closer to the moments that define sports. By working collaboratively with Major League Baseball and regulators, we can create new ways for fans to engage with the game while protecting the integrity of the sport. Look, let's establish one truism of the universe. One is that there's two truisms of the universe. One is that mass cannot travel greater than the speed of light, as Einstein proved. And two, the other truism of the universe is that prediction markets are gambling. Okay. What we are doing, this is a pretty decent marketing strategy to get people to bet on things. Now, I think this is actually has a potential to be far more harmful to the integrity of the game than just straight up gambling, because these prediction markets are on all kinds of things. You could have a prediction as to how many pitches does the pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds pitch in the game against the Pirates, all kinds of crap. And I think that is ripe for corruption. So you have a problem with people gambling, like doing, gambling stuff here and there. What were there, 6 or 7 games in the basketball we did a while ago? Think about this. How easy it is for a pitcher to throw a ball if he wants to, or a batter to pretend to not hit a ball.
Plus, some of these are such a minutia style predictions that they actually don't even they don't. You can even for the person let's call him the pitcher that's executing this. You don't even have to put the integrity of winning or losing odds.
Pitch here and there throws it off.
It's that specific. If you want the most kind of dour real world example of this, and I don't even say this to get political because I don't even know what the angle is, but right now there is serious doubt and suspicion that insiders have made bets but made predictions on Kelsey about, again, minute aspects of the war in Iran, and made millions.
I have not seen that, but I wouldn't doubt it.
So, and these are just, there's not facts yet, but these are credible news sources saying, hey, people that watch these things, just like we've talked about, whether, because they know how to sniff these things out in sports. Well, the same kind of sniffers are seeing like some very troubling trends in Kelsey, future predictions against war outcomes that are being driven by insiders. So if you want the most,
that's
the
really
biggest
dark,
example,
man. That is really dark.
but if you can do it for pitches or free throws, you can do it for that. It just shows you the manipulability of the entire system.
Yeah, I think I'm not one to wish for more government regulation on nearly anything, but I think a recognition that this is gambling and needs to be regulated as any other gambling market would be regulated. And after the Supreme Court, that would be mostly locally. I think we need to come to the realization that Kelsey and Polymarket are gambling, and that would go a long way towards helping this. But even if you do that, again, it doesn't help the Mariners pitcher, needs to have this many balls in a game, and he could do that, and nobody would ever know.
Yeah, and in fact, the Attorney General of Arizona has just filed a suit or suing Kelsey for this exact same issue. So we'll get our test case coming here up pretty quickly. I don't think anyone's surprised at how quickly a test case emerged on this.
Well, and what's the reasonable argument that it's not gambling?
Well, I think
out to me,
this is what Arizona is going to, just basically let's ask the question.
Obviously, it's gambling. You are placing money down on a prediction about the future, which is not any different than saying, I'm going to place money down on the hope that this next card is going to get me to 21.
Yeah, and their big defense is always like, no, it's actually more like the stock market. But then the best defense against that was like, well,
You're not
kind of
buying an
also
interest in
betting.
you're not buying, yeah, but also a stock market, a stock purchase is a small purchase of a company. So you own a part of a company. In the case of the Kalshi and Polymarket prediction markets, you're not buying an interest in anything. You're placing money on a prediction on the future. It's more like the commodities trading
Right.
than anything.
So yeah, and their chief line of defense when
But it's just a prediction market, which is not any different than betting on putting $20 on the Seahawks to beat the Chiefs.
I'd actually point out that one huge difference that it does is that your traditional sports gambling houses are actually being asked to restrict what they offer along these lines. Like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do the prop bets. Maybe you shouldn't do the
But it's okay with Kalshi
But
and
in Kalshi,
Polymarket.
it's like just a complete unchecked,
It's
right?
a fake stock market, so it's okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit like college sports versus pro sports in terms of like there's a very restrictive labor laws that or labor rules that about free agency and how much you can spend, where in college sports it's just a complete Pandora's box. It's sort of similar. So in terms of like one side is being asked to restrict themselves even more and then look over to their shoulder and say, but what about what's going on over there, which is completely unfettered?
I don't even know how these people with a straight face can claim this is a stock market. How can you look at somebody in the eye and say, you know what? It strikes me as a couple of drunk college students came up with this and say, dude, what can we do here? And let's call this a stock market. I mean, I'm being facetious, but it is wholly disingenuous to compare any of this to a stock market when all you're doing is you're accepting money on a prediction for the future, and if the prediction comes true, you're going to receive a payout. That is gambling in the story. That is not a stock market.
The genesis of it really is that you've had politics in America and probably other places too that have been treated like sporting events. Everyone, for the last, let's call it 40 years, right? So, the horse race, right? Like we even use sports idioms and euphemisms and metaphors to describe it. So what happened was basically over the last like 25, 30 years, you think of people like Nate Silver and like the kind of mathification of everything, made it so nerds that didn't like sports but wanted to gamble started to do it against electoral politics because it actually had all the hallmarks, language, and kind of I'm smarter than the house mentality, right? That drives gambling in these spaces. So all these prediction markets came out of smaller attempts to basically gamblify and gamify electoral politics, and then it just did. Well, if you can do who wins or loses, and then what percent and how many came out or whatever, then you can do that about a whole other bunch of things, and that was the scale model for those businesses. But it really did grow out of the kind of mathification, Nate Silver. How do we monetize people's interest in the horse race of electoral politics? That's actually that's why we're here.
And to that point, I think Kalshi and Polymarket have had a pretty good read on elections through their data.
No, that gave them and that in fact gave them legitimacy. Yeah. They became good at that, and then it was like, well, why not? Literally 1,000 other things.
Because I think, and I've never looked at any of this in detail. I'm just not into this. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can bet on a lot of things through Kalshi and Polymarket. Now, like the success of Coca-Cola and selling their new drink or what. I mean, I'm making this up completely, but stuff like that.
It's itemized. Yes, 100%. Remember, right. Last time we talked about this, I said, maybe I'll lay down a bet about whether Josh Allen would show up at the Oscars. I'm glad I did not, because I would have lost.
Did he show up?
He did not. He did not.
Now, is he Is he dating someone in
He's
the intern
married to
world?
somebody that was in Sinners, but she's also like 7 or 8 months pregnant, which I didn't know at the time, or else that
You
would have
didn't do
been.
your research,
I know
man.
that would have been. That's why I didn't. That's why I only bragged about it. Never made the bet. But then I would have obviously, if I had gotten the data, I would have backed off that bet.
Well, congrats on Josh Allen for becoming or about to become a father, I guess.
I think it's any day now. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he is a father now, depending on how you look at it. But congratulations on the baby being born.
All right. See, we have one more story. I mean, I could.
We're running out of time. Got to be quick.
Yeah. So quick. Some NCAA by the numbers. Here's the number that you need to know overall, which I don't even have as a number, but this has been a wildly successful season of college, men's college basketball, regular season highest ratings it's had in 10 to 15 years. And the tournament has just rolled on from there. So, some of the stats that we'll share here, and there's a lot of people that are worried about many aspects of college athletics, but so far in the world of eyeballs, TV rights, and money, it does not seem to be negatively affecting it yet.
Yeah, real quick, because again, we're out of time here, but Sportico had a Sweet 16 article called Sweet 16 by Numbers, 10 delicious data points on men's tourney. Lev Akabas, dated March 26, and we're just going to blow through these. Texas is still in, which is not historically a basketball team, has the nation's largest athletic budget. Not that surprising. There are no mid majors left in Sweet 16, and the column is basically saying it's because the big teams have bought out all the players because of NIL. Same, below average number of early round upsets for the same reason. Again, NIL. Iowa State, if anybody wondering, has the smallest men's basketball budget in the field, only 9.8 million, meaning that's what their payroll is for their professional players. What else here? 37 of 80 starters in the Sweet 16 transferred from another D1 school.
But
Again, that's
interesting on that one though, is that's down.
Yeah, down from last year.
Yeah,
right,
so
yeah.
that's your one little counterfactual. The fact that's the one you always need one sheep that goes against the herd. That's the one little factoid there that sort of sticks out as contradictory.
Majority of Sweet 16 teams had an international starter. Average, I don't care about the average coach age, but so that's it. So it's the point here is what we've been saying, which is NIL has dramatically affected the market.
You know what? Yes. And one, data point that it was interesting from here that we don't normally talk about that I wouldn't have even guessed until I saw this list was that they also, this number 8, the majority of Sweet 16 teams have an international starter. The reason that's new is actually NIL. Because if you think about 5, 7, 10 years ago, an international player's best bet was to do some minor, whatever, European leagues or whatever, and get to a draftable age. And then they would jump right into the NBA draft without ever touching a day of college basketball. Well, now there's more money in college basketball, plus the more exposure, all the other halo benefits from that you don't have to go play in the Greek league for a year from 17 to 20 or 17 to 19. You can actually go make good money in college basketball and get a better, higher profile and compete against the guys that you're going to be competing against in the NBA and have a better chance of NBA success and draft positioning. So that one to me, it was like that one's like, oh, there's an interesting kind of like secondary effect of NIL.
Yeah, and you can make generational wealth just in college basketball.
Yeah. No matter where you're from.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No more Romanian league for you.
That's right.
All right, Steve. So I guess it's all draft all the time at the Hogsty?
Yeah, we are through free agency basically. So we're doing, counting down to the draft. We do that every Thursday on the Hogsty podcast and in all of our regular written content.
All right. We will see you in 2 weeks.